So I'd like to talk about another sort of element of the creative challenge. What about how authors feel about AI? So as a trade publisher, how are authors challenged by the advent of this new technology? What's it going to do for fiction? What's it going to do for the quality output of commercial content? So I don't know if any of you are aware of a small startup from America called Botnik, but it was very, very famous a few weeks ago. Botnik wrote something called Harry Potter and the Portrait of What Looked Like a Large Pile of Ash. And it did this based on predictive keyboards. So it's not true machine learning, and it's not purely automated. It was widely misreported as the auto-generated Harry Potter chapter. It's actually the heavily curated Harry Potter chapter. So the predictive keyboards were basically fed the entirety of the 7 original Harry Potter novels. And then a few comedians sat down and spat out an entire chapter of Harry Potter based on what the keyboards had learnt. And sections of it, paragraphs, were pretty convincing. You know, Harry, Ron, and Hermione dash into the Forbidden Forest. They're being chased by a spider. So far, so good. And then Ron and Hermione resort to cannibalism. Slightly less convincing. So it showed in a very, very short, brilliant madcap summary. I highly recommend reading it. It's only about 13 pages. It won't take you very long. But the sort of pitfall of thinking that technology is already going to overtake creatives. The truth is, sections of it, short segments, with people who knew the books inside out, who were trying to game the system, couldn't actually create something that was convincingly Harry Potter. So even sort of going into it, armed with knowing exactly what they were doing, knowing the audience they were playing to, and with all of the sort of tools at their disposal, they couldn't reliably recreate the magic of the original books. So authors don't need to worry too much yet. But the caveat is, you know, the more machines learn and the rate of change at which that's happening, the faster things will be completely overhauled. So, you know, Botnik now, not so clever, not so bright, and reliant on humans to tell it what to do. But as soon as those keyboards are given context, as soon as it's able to intuit the kind of narrative flow, which is something that, you know, literary historians have been analyzing for centuries. So there's plenty of data on how that could be cut, you know, the tropes of a cliffhanger. Once all of that is given context in the keyboard, suddenly the system sort of changes and it can become a lot more compelling. So authors can't be completely relaxed about what happens next. But I think one of the things that was, you know, best about this, and one of the reasons why I found it so entertaining, was it was a sort of great example of the way the internet makes games of these systems. So there was famously the 2 Facebook chatbots who had to be turned off because they started talking to each other in a language only they could interpret, which is another, you know, far extreme example of science fiction, you know, going too far. But the point is, you know, we went to this earlier on when we were talking about the box. You get out of AI what you put into it. So if a consumer runs up to Alexa and tries to confuse it or tries to break it, and I have seen people do this, the computer, the technology, gets confused. If you give it conflicting commands or interrupt it or try and make it change program midway through or tell it it's given you a bad joke or a bad answer, it will apologize, which can be quite entertaining. So, you know, while machines can be gamed, consumers will do that. And what will be really, really key is what happens when computers start setting the narrative on how these programs should work.